The Switch 2 has been making its rounds in social media and also apparently in its sales. Recently, we found out a couple of things have been happening. Number one, Nintendo is in fact going around and bricking consoles directly. Yeah, I'm not kidding. If you're using a MIG Switch on the Switch 2, apparently stop doing it. Don't. You're going to have a big problem. We'll talk about that in just a moment. And on top of that, it turns out that the use of game key cards may not have been the best bet for Nintendo overall, especially for third-party publishers, because it may be turning out with more information that maybe putting your game on the Switch 2 doesn't automatically mean a high-end amount of sales. What am I talking about? Well, according to Wario64 tweeting this out the other day, saying this: according to the game business, most third-party Switch 2 games posted very low numbers. One third-party publisher characterized the numbers as, quote, below our lowest estimates, despite strong hardware sales. Cyberpunk 2077 was the best-selling third-party game. Has the game actually on the cart, beating launch sales of Witcher 3 on the Switch 1. Now, if you're like me, you're probably thinking to yourself, who the hell is the game business? Well, it turns out the game business is being run by Christopher Dring. And if you know anything about me on this channel, you know I don't trust this man as far as I can throw him. He's had very salacious things to say about game sales without providing any sort of factual information at all whatsoever. And honestly, this isn't the first time he's said a undisclosed publisher and or developer said a bad thing about company. He's done that with Xbox and he's doing it again with Nintendo. So in reality, I'm not taking anything this guy says as a fact. But the thing is, it wasn't just about that one publisher talking about sales being lower than low in expectations. The article also said this: what are the numbers, Mason? 62% of Switch 2 physical game sales in the US on launch week were from first-party games, excluding the Mario Kart World bundle by Circana. 48% of the Switch 2 physical game sales in the UK on launch week were from first-party games, excluding Mario Kart World in the bundle by Nielsen. 86% of Switch 2 physical game sales in the UK were from first-party games, including Mario Kart World. By comparison, for the launch of Switch 1, 89% of UK physical game sales were from first-party games in Nielsen. And for the launch month of the Switch 1 in the US, 81% of physical game sales were from first-party games via Circana. CD Projekt Cyberpunk 2077 was also the best-selling third-party game during the launch of Switch 2, beating launch sales of CD Projekt Red's Witcher 3 on Switch 1, according to Nielsen. And Sega was the number 3 biggest publisher on the Switch 2 at launch via Circana. When it comes to games released both physically and digitally, over 80% of the Switch 2 game sales came from physical retailers, data shared by publishers. Now, here's the problem with a lot of what happens in terms of talking about game sales, and especially when talking about game sales according to Christopher Dring. It's always these very strange, obtuse, very cherry-picked specific things. If you've noticed, physical UK game sales, it's never just like total game sales in general. They always pin down to something very specific, and I don't think that we're looking at the entire set of brevity of numbers being happening in total game sales across all third-party publishers that publish games onto the Switch 2. Unfortunately, I may have to side with the Nintendrones on this one, because it looks like a lot of this data is in fact cherry-picked by good old Christopher Cockeye Dring, and the numbers he's putting out do not make a whole lot of sense, especially given his previous track record talking about other game companies and other game publishers on other platforms especially. The thing is, though, we have some actual information via Circana talking about this as well. Matt Piscatella tweeted this out directly on Blue Sky. Hate to contribute to a discourse, but third-party share of Switch 2 software in the US is far better than it was during the Switch 1 launch. Third-party unit share of Switch 2 physical software during week 1 reached just shy of 40%. From 1 month of the original Switch launch, it was less than 20%. Like, it's far too early to claim best or worst this or that or whatever when it comes to Switch 2. Sheesh, the thing hasn't even been out for 3 weeks yet. Chill, Winston. Source: Circana Retail Tracking Service. You get bonus points for knowing the movie reference. Now, Matt, I don't know about you, but I'm also a very big fan of Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels. Gotcha on that one. The thing is, though, this is what we're talking about here. The problem is that people like Christopher Dring are going around and have been going around talking about game sales without proper information, or pinpointing things down to a very specific aspect of what is actually occurring in the global scale of video games. However, though, that doesn't mean this isn't without criticism, because this could be a factor overall. Number one, we don't know who that publisher in fact is or what their expectations were, but that doesn't mean that everything is scot-free and clear for Nintendo. In fact, Kofi, friend of the channel, an actual friend of the channel, said this recently. Old ass games, sold at a premium. Games are not even on the cart. A regular Joe could have told you all these things would flop. Now again, we don't know if these things were actually flops in terms of third-party publishers, but we do know this. There have been rumors going around that Nintendo is restricting the size of the actual key cards that are available for publishers for third-party, whether or not it's the full size or just the digital only. And that seems to be the real big problem. There's no in-between sizes at all for publishers to choose from where they're going to be putting their games on. We see games that are 1 or 2 gigs like Bravely Default going around being on a game keycard only. We've seen games like Cyberpunk 2077 choosing the more expensive game keycard to put the entire game physically on that card directly. I feel this is a massive issue for Nintendo, specifically because a lot of the cartridges and even the box art specifically state, hey, this is a game key card. You're going to have a digital download even if you buy this game physically. And that, I feel, is where a lot of third-party publishers are going to be having a problem overall, having a lack of choice altogether, not only for the publisher, but also for the consumer as well. Like And Yeti stated this, it's the key cards, why not just get digital? And that is a fantastic point. If you go to the store and you know the game is on a digital key card only, and you can only get it that way after downloading it, why even go to the store or buy it physically in the first place? That, I feel, is where a lot of sales are going to be being misled in terms of what is part of the expectations for a lot of third-party publishers. And even though I'm someone who definitely likes to sail the high seas, that doesn't mean I don't go ahead and buy physical games, especially when they're all complete on the cart. I have a massive PS1, PS2, PS3 library of actual physical games, and I'm even going around now and buying secondhand Switch 1 games, because not only are they cheaper, but at the same time, you can't even find most of these games anymore in just regular store shelves. But Cromwell also said this directly, and I think it really does speak volumes to what is being shown from Christopher Dring's quote-unquote reporting. Nintendo platforms are extremely unique. Long story short, the idea that existing games can launch on the platform with little fanfare and simply capture that audience isn't and probably won't ever be reality. Cyberpunk, on the other hand, is a genuinely compelling milestone for that device. It earned its attention. Not so for many games that see the user base and expect results on some idea of average conversion. This, in fact, does tie directly to Kofi's tweet as well. Like he said before, full-priced games or overpriced games after being on multiple platforms earlier on, no price discounts whatsoever, game key cards, so not even ownership of the actual disc itself, and then at the same time having to download the game, so why not just buy digitally at a better price from a CD Keys website? I think that's really what's happening here. We don't, again, know what is truly happening in terms of the number of sales or what the expectations were, and like I said before, Christopher Dring's reporting is always sketchy at best, if you ask me. But the thing is, people are clearly pointing out exactly what could be the problem with physical game sales on the Nintendo Switch 2. And it feels like it leads into the next part of this video, because Nintendo may be wanting to control more about where you spend your money and how you spend it, rather than actually giving you the full end product overall. And that's where this comes in, to where Nintendo is now going around and bricking consoles. According to IGN, Nintendo Switch 2 users have reportedly been blocked from accessing the console's online services until further notice, and believe their use of the MIG-Switch cartridge is the cause. The MIG-Switch use is in fact the direct cause of why people are being locked out of their online accounts for the Nintendo Switch 2. According to Scattered Brain, who has made 2 videos about this specific topic directly, go sub to him, go check them out as well. He has had to go through and been testing the MIG-Switch keycard on his Nintendo Switch 2. During that testing, he was in fact locked out completely from his Nintendo Switch 2 overall, even though he physically already owned those games. He already dumped those those games legally onto the MiG Switch, and then at the same time decided to use that Switch keycard on his Switch 2. Nintendo directly locked his account out completely, thereby making his Switch 2 a veritable brick altogether. He could not access any online components, could not do anything, and could barely even restore or reset his entire Switch 2 to factory default settings to the previous firmware update until he unlinked his account to that Nintendo Switch 2 directly, which you can only then unlink once per year on one device, which truly is the most wild thing of all. Why would any company want to exert that amount of control on a device altogether? And the crazier part is, it turns out that you can bypass this, but the actual cost of bypassing this lockout on your Switch 2 is to go off and buy another Switch 2. No, I'm not kidding. Scatterbrain then turned around and bought a second Switch 2 to basically test if his account was locked out or if the Switch 2 was locked. And it turns out that after he unlinked his account from the Switch 2 originally that was bricked and he put it on the new one, the account wasn't locked out itself, but the physical console on its own was the issue, and that became a veritable brick altogether. This is a massive concern far and beyond anyone could ever comprehend, because it isn't just Nintendo locking out accounts. It is Nintendo literally going through requiring you to be online to activate the basic features of your console, and then at the same time going through and monitoring how you are operating your device, whether or not you're using quote-unquote unauthorized or authorized hardware for your usage of the console you already paid for, that you already gave them the money for in the first place. That exact behavior would be very similar to if I went ahead and AMD decided to brick my GPU from getting driver updates simply because I used an open source driver that I wanted to test out for other specific games. Exerting that amount of control onto a piece of hardware or device that you've already purchased beforehand, that you legally applied to, that you already did that trade of currency for product in the beginning, does not sit well with me whatsoever. How anybody could defend this in any conceivable stance is wild to me, but of course, these things do come with the bootlickers of Nintendo. Because Mario Circuit _ what an apropos name, said this, not trying to come off as a bootlicker, but it's so funny seeing people being fucked over by blatantly using illegal means that go against Nintendo's TOS, and then crying that Nintendo is a shitty company. Look, Mario Circuit _ you are in fact, Evan, dare I say, because your name is on there, Evan, you are in fact a literal corporate bootlicker. There is nothing illegal about the MiG Switch. There is nothing illegal about having a digital backup of your physical games. And the best part is simply because you're trying to go ahead and defend Nintendo egregiously using their terms of service to go ahead and lock customers and consumers into a format of control. My boy, that boot has to taste like a Tootsie Pop, because there's no way you're not getting to the center of that thing with the amount that you've been licking it directly in front of everybody, exposing to almost 1 million people on Twitter and 20,000 likes, by the way, that you are in fact a corporate glazer, writer, and bootlicker extraordinaire. Here's Gibson Bo Bibson saying this over Switch Tools testing his MiG Switch and getting banned online. I've always been kind of confused by the whole I legally dumped my games, it's legal thing, because like you're using an unauthorized piece of hardware to launch / run those dumps. Like, I'm not anti-piracy by any means, but you did just essentially make a bootleg cartridge, LMAO. This is the crazy part about this entire thing to me. The fact that so many Nintendo people on the internet will do everything they can to ride a company consistently. Simply because it doesn't have the Nintendo seal of approval on the box doesn't mean I should not be able to use it on my piece of hardware. I've already given the money, hypothetically, I haven't bought a Switch 2, this is my Steam Deck, by the way. If I gave Valve my money for the Steam Deck and they turn around and said, hey, that's great that you bought the product, but we're going to monitor everything that you do internally with this device, and then anything you add to it that we don't approve of at any given time, we're going to go ahead and revoke that device from from you because you're no longer going to be able to access it on the internet whatsoever. You can't update it. You can't go ahead and factory reset it. And basically, it's going to become a brick completely. This goes completely against any sort of right to repair. And that is the bigger issue of this as well. When you go ahead and you give a company the money already and you have the product in return, that transaction, that entire relationship is no longer active. It's over. I've already given them the money. They should not be able to exert any more control onto the device I already paid for. And this is the big problem overall that we've been seeing. The amount of control Nintendo has been exerting on their own devices is the biggest reason why I have chosen not to buy a Switch 2, and I'm sticking with my Switch 1 and my Steam Deck to, in fact, emulate all of my games. The complete inability for anybody on the internet to, in fact, go around dick ride this company excessively and then to be like, you guys, you're just like not giving Nintendo your money, you know. That's the thing. Nintendo doesn't just get my money directly. It's not a charity. It's a company and a business. They need to be better at giving me the actual product for what I paid for, rather than trying to control the aspect of what I do in every single moment of every single facet of that device, even though I've already purchased it directly. There should not be any more further control of me giving them the money and then giving me the product. They don't get to go to my house and suck the out of my mouth simply because they don't like the way I'm sucking. And that is the biggest issue here. The control over the device part, not the me sucking. I should have thought of that before I made that joke. The fact that Nintendo is going around and giving incredibly limited options to third-party publishers of how they can provide their game content to their customers, focusing more on the digital aspect rather than the physical ones, keeping customers inclined to only purchase games digitally, providing more return for Nintendo overall, removing shipping, logistics, manufacturing, and etc. This is beyond reach of any sort of company I've seen before, and until Nintendo changes things drastically and turns things around, they have lost a customer. Now, I know I'm going to hear this, but you're just one guy. Everybody else bought it and is having a great time. Sure, you can enjoy that all you want, but I'm not going to let a company or corpo dictate what happens to me and the products that I purchase even after the transaction has already been completed. If you want to be a corporate simp, by all, be that corporate simp, but don't get mad when I put you in this content and then make fun of you for licking the boot. So ladies and gentlemen, let me know what you guys think about this in the comment section down below. Do you think Christopher Dring may in fact be right about this? Do you feel at the same time that you did not buy games physically because of the game keycard issue? And are you only specifically going to buy games that are completely on the cart, or have you gone fully digital as well? And at the same time, are you even okay with how Nintendo is approaching what they're doing with their consoles directly and possibly even removing right to repair from the customer? I'd love to see what you guys have to say, so put that, like I said, in the comments section down below. Now, if you want to see more of this kind of content, more PC port reviews, gaming news, Steam Deck videos, fanboy content, and live streams every Saturday night, 8:45 p.m. Eastern, subscribe to the channel. We're on our way to 85,000 subs, and I just want to say thank you guys so very much. Now, of course, if you want Discord access and emotes during live streams, become a YouTube member. It's as low as $1. If you don't want to spend the buck, don't sweat it. Saturday nights, 8:45 p.m. Eastern, come on down, hang out in the live stream. Trust me, you have a hell of a time as you get to watch 800 to 900 people embarrass me and humiliate me with AITTS. I guarantee you're going to laugh. With all that being said, though, thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you have a great one, and I'll see you next time. Peace!